They always said humans were late bloomers. The last ones into the stars, the last ones to unify under a banner, the last ones to join the Galactic Accord. But they never questioned why. Why we were slow. Why we watched instead of rushed. Why we endured instead of attacked. They didn't know we were sealed. I was stationed on Darren 7, a mining colony on the edge of Accord space. Nothing glamorous, dust, drills, and damn long nights under 3 dying suns. My job was simple: monitor seismic activity, report anomalies, and keep the miners from drilling into old tech or buried nightmares. We'd been warned about old ruins, pre-Accord, long before the stars were mapped. The ancients had left them everywhere, but we never expected to find one beneath Darren 7. It was Kel who broke the seal. That smug bastard thought he knew everything, fresh out of the academy, full of theories and ego, waving around credentials like they meant something on a rock like this. He wanted to go deeper when the scanners showed a hollow chamber under Sector 12. I told him no. Protocol was clear. Report. Wait for clearance. He didn't wait. He went in with 2 drones and a pack of self-righteous ambition. What came out wasn't data. It was a pulse. It hit everyone. Not just on the colony, across the damn sector. I felt it like someone dragging claws across the inside of my skull. My hands shook for hours, and I don't shake. I did tours in the Orion Wars, and even when I saw brothers turned to ash by plasma fire, I never shook like that. The dreams came next. Screaming metal, blood rivers, voices that weren't mine whispering names I didn't recognize, but felt like I should. And rage. Old, heavy rage that didn't belong to me. It lived in my chest like a second heart, pounding louder each night. Kel? He was found convulsing near the excavation site, eyes burned white, mouth muttering in a tongue no translator could decode. We locked him in Med Bay. He broke 3 restraints by morning. He wasn't Kel anymore. We ran scans on the ruins. That's when it got worse. The architecture was human, millennia older than the first recorded jump drive. DNA traces matched Earth baseline profiles, art etched into stone and steel, humans, massive, godlike, their bodies marked with war sigils and ancient wounds. They weren't tools or tech down there. They were tombs, number prisons. Whatever Kel had opened, it hadn't just woken some artifact. It had touched something ancient, something buried in us. By day 3, 5 more miners had collapsed. Symptoms were the same: seizures, hallucinations, violent outbursts. We isolated them, but the guards began reporting strange behavior, speaking in sync, eyes glowing faintly under UV light, impossible strength during fits. And me? I kept dreaming? No, remembering. I saw a throne made of skulls floating in space, saw hands, my hands, covered in blood, pulling apart alien machines like they were made of sand. I heard a name, low and thunderous, echoing from the void. Kortal Vail. I said it out loud once. My nose bled for an hour. Command didn't believe any of it. They sent a science vessel. It exploded before it hit orbit. Wreckage still rains down on the far ridges. There was no attack, no sign of impact, just unmade. That was the final proof. Humans weren't just another species. We weren't just clever apes who figured out star drives. We were made for war. We were war, locked away by something ancient enough to fear what we could become. And now? That seal's broken, and I can feel something stirring in me, like a voice I've known since birth finally speaking clearly. A part of me that doesn't care about peace, about laws, about diplomacy. It wants vengeance, and it remembers. The sun on Darren 7 doesn't rise. It bleeds. It leaks over the horizon like a wound trying to remember how to clot. That morning, if you could call it that, I stood on the edge of the cliff above Sector 12, staring down into the cracked earth where it had all started. Kel was still alive, though I wish he wasn't. We kept him restrained in sub-level C, surrounded by auto turrets, 4 shock guards, and a neural dampener. Didn't matter. He smiled through all of it. Every single second. Even when his bones cracked during seizures, even when he started vomiting blood so black it smoked on contact with the air, he grinned like a man who finally understood the joke. I visited him again that day. "Do you know what you did?" I asked him through the reinforced glass. He tilted his head, twitchy, broken. His skin looked like it was splitting at the edges, like something inside wanted out. "I didn't do anything," he said slowly, words dragged out like they hurt. "I only reminded us what we are." I stared at him for a long time. My jaw was tight, my fists tighter. I wanted to believe he was just broken. That it was some alien virus, some neural parasite. But something in my gut said no. That deep part of me that used to keep me alive in combat, the voice that never shouted, just knew, said this was different. He looked up, and his smile widened unnaturally. "You feel it too, don't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because he was right. Every hour, the pressure behind my eyes built a little more. My hands itched. My dreams were turning into memories. Vivid, brutal, familiar. A golden battlefield on a shattered moon. I was towering, armored, inhuman, not some warrior, something more, something ancient. And there were others. Hundreds. All human, but not like us. They stood shoulder to shoulder with weapons too big to exist and eyes glowing like dying stars. I was one of them. I am one of them. I walked back to command, where Merrick waited with that same glassy-eyed panic everyone had started carrying. He was one of the few I trusted, mostly because he'd seen combat. Real combat. He knew the difference between fear and instinct. "You're not going to like this," he said before I even stepped inside. "Try me." "We got a signal burst, shortwave, untraceable source, just 2 words. He stirs." Then the comms console melted, literally, cooked from the inside. I stared at him. "That's not tech." It's not." We both stood in silence for a while, then he handed me a datapad. "The medical scans on the infected? Their muscle density has doubled, bone structures shifting. One of them bent a plasma rifle in half during restraint, with his hands." "Kel." Merrick's jaw clenched. His heart stopped at 0400, then restarted, 5 minutes later. We didn't say what we were both thinking. Whatever Kel had touched hadn't just awakened something. It had possessed it. Worn him like a skin suit until his body could handle whatever the hell was now piloting him. Merrick lowered his voice. "He's not the only one. I've got reports from other colonies. Quiet reports, buried under bureaucracy, sudden aggression spikes, dormant sites activating, a whole sector sealed off near the Corin Drift after a crew found a vault made of human bones." "It's spreading," I said. "It's not a virus. It's memory." That line hit me deep. Not because it was poetic, but because it felt true. This wasn't some alien curse or bioweapon. This was a return, a reset, something buried in the genetic bedrock of humanity finally waking up. And someone out there had known. That's why we were sealed. Why we evolved so slow. Why we arrived at the stars decades behind everyone else. Because if we'd come too soon, the galaxy would have burned. Later that day, I made the mistake of looking into the tomb again. I don't know why. Maybe it was that voice growing louder. Maybe I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. I descended alone into Sector 12's black wound. The air changed the further down I went, not just colder but heavier, like it knew I was there, like it remembered me. The walls pulsed faintly, lines of red etched deep into ancient obsidian, symbols I couldn't read, but understood. They told stories without words. We weren't born on Earth. We were exiled there. War gods. too violent, too hungry, too capable of annihilation to be allowed into the stars. So someone bound us in flesh, stripped our memory, sent us to a dead-end planet with short lives and weaker bodies. But not forever. Not sealed forever. The central chamber was deeper now. The floor had cracked open since the last scan, revealing a stairwell of black stone spiraling downward. At the bottom stood a throne, empty, and at its base, armor, massive, ancient, shaped like it had been forged from the core of suns, the same shape from my dreams. It called to me. I took one step forward, then another. I didn't feel fear. I felt belonging, like this place had waited for me. When my hand touched the chest plate, the world vanished. I wasn't on Darren 7 anymore. I stood on the edge of a burning starfield, a battlefield suspended in the void. Hundreds of armored titans like me clashed with machines the size of cities. Whole planets shattered underfoot. War chants thundered louder than nova blasts. And I stood at the center. My name roared by warriors, screamed by enemies, whispered by gods. Kor Talvale. The vision snapped. I was back in the chamber, breathless, sweating. But something had changed. My heartbeat wasn't mine anymore. It was older, heavier, like the heart of a world. The seal wasn't broken. I was. I returned to base, eyes burning, skin humming like a power core. Merrick saw me and flinched. "What the hell happened to you?" he asked. "They lied," I said. "About everything." "Who?" "All of them. The Accord, the Ancients, the ones who set the rules for the stars. They knew who we were, who we used to be, and they made damn sure we never remembered." Merrick grabbed my shoulder. "What do we do?" "First, lock this colony down. No comms out, no ships leave. If word gets out before we're ready, before we understand what we are, it'll trigger a response, a violent one. And second?" I looked out across the red-lit valley, where the tomb pulsed like a second heartbeat. "We find the others, because if I've awakened, then they will too." Merrick hesitated. "And what happens when we're all awake?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't, because the truth was worse than anything we were ready to face. When the war gods return, there will be no diplomacy, no councils, no peace talks. There will be war. Pure, total, human. And this time, nothing will seal us again. They came for us on the 5th day. Not aliens, not monsters, not some twisted ancient race trying to finish what they started. Number, it was the Accord. They didn't even announce it. No hails, no diplomatic channels, no warnings. They just dropped orbital strikes. We saw the sky light up first, like lightning crawling sideways through black glass. Then came the tremors, roaring up from the crust as shockwaves split the land. 2 of our outer structures vanished instantly, just heat and ash. They wanted to erase us before we could speak, before we could remember too much. Merrick burst into my quarters mid-strike, blood down his face. "They're hitting civilian zones. They don't give a damn who's infected or not." I pulled on my gear. Armor, not regulation, mine. The stuff I hadn't touched since the Orion Wars. Felt tighter now. Not because I was out of shape, because I was no longer the same man who once wore it. I was heavier, denser. Like the blood in my veins had thickened into something ancient and molten. We reached command as the colony shook again. The lights were dead. Systems fried. That meant one thing. They were jamming our core grid. "They're not just here to kill us," Merrick growled. "They're here to erase the evidence, wipe the entire rock clean." "They're afraid," I said, walking straight into the war room. "And they should be." The last feed we had showed a fleet of Accord ships in orbit. Not scouts. Purge-class vessels. The kind they used when diplomacy failed and extinction was on the table. I stood in front of the central display, eyes locked on the largest cruiser. My knuckles cracked by themselves. They knew this might happen. Maybe even planned for it, I said. That's why there's no warning, no demand for surrender. They can't risk it spreading. Merrick pulled up whatever was left of the colony systems. They jammed all outbound comms except for encrypted Accord channels. They're sending kill codes to our security AI, trying to turn our own mechs on us. They want the place to implode from the inside. He looked at me, real fear in his eyes. So, what's our move? I walked toward the back of the room, where we stored the old relics, stuff we couldn't explain. Some thought they were ancient alien artifacts. Now I knew better. I pulled back the tarp. It was the armor. The real armor. Not made from alloys. From something else. Something that felt like bone, but pulsed like a living thing. I stared at it for a moment, then reached out and touched it. My vision snapped. I wasn't on Darren 7 anymore. Again. I stood at the head of a war host, flames rising around me. My voice was not a voice, it was a command that shook the cosmos. Ships knelt in orbit, moons cracked under my boots, and before me stood thousands like me, roaring the name the stars had tried to forget, Kor Tal Vael. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a memory. I snapped back, my palm still pressed to the chest plate. The armor didn't resist me. It welcomed me, fused along my arms, ribcage, spine. It didn't cover flesh. It awakened it. Merrick took a step back. Your eyes, they're glowing. I looked at my reflection in the black glass. My pupils were gone, replaced by two small suns. I'm remembering who I am, I said softly, and so will they. We made it to sublevel C where the infected were held, some still convulsing, some already calm and eerily still. But their eyes, all glowing faintly now, like mine, like Kel's before he... I stopped in my tracks. The cell where Kel had been restrained was open, empty. I turned to the guards. Who let him out? They looked at each other, pale, shaking. One spoke up. He walked out. We tried to stop him. One of the turrets shot him point blank. He didn't even flinch, just kept walking. Where is he now? No one knew. But I had a feeling. He was going to the throne. The first to awaken would be drawn to it. Like a beacon. Like the center of who we really were. Outside, the strikes had stopped. Not because the Accord gave up, but because they were landing troops. Cleaner teams. Elite suppression squads with one purpose: erase evidence and bury the colony with bodies if necessary. I heard the gunships before I saw them. Low hum, then the screaming of anti-grav engines. They dropped fast. 4 squads per drop pod, full armor, plasma weapons. They weren't coming to arrest us. They were coming to execute us. I looked at Merrick. Get the infected out. Arm them. Give them anything you've got. If they resist, knock them out and drag them. He hesitated. They're not all stable. Neither am I. Doesn't matter. We either remember who we are now, or we die forgotten. He nodded and ran. I stayed behind. The first Accord squad breached the west gate. Tactical, precise. They cleared our drones in seconds. I watched them through the outer cameras. Their commander barked orders. They moved with practiced efficiency. I stepped out into the open, alone. They saw me, raised their weapons. Identify yourself, one ordered. I didn't speak. I walked. Final warning, stand down or we will... He never finished. I moved faster than I thought possible. 1 second I was 10 feet away. The next, my fist shattered the lead trooper's visor and caved his face in. The rest opened fire. Plasma bolts scorched the air, but none touched me. I moved. Like smoke. Like lightning. Like memory. I didn't fight with technique. I fought with instinct. Brutal. Relentless. Ancient. These weren't warriors. They were children with toys. By the time Merrick arrived with the others, I was standing in a crater of bodies, breathing hard, my hands dripping with blood and melted armor. He stared at me like I was a myth. I think they all felt you," he said quietly. Behind him stood the infected, men and women still shivering, still bleeding from the transformation. But awake now, eyes glowing, bodies already changing. I stepped forward. "You feel it, don't you?" I said to them. "The weight in your chest, the memory. You don't know the words yet, but you know the rage. You were born with it, buried in it, and now it's time." They looked at me like I was their past and future in one. I pointed toward the excavation site. "The throne awaits." We moved as a unit, a war host being born again in the fire of betrayal. Above us the skies burned with gunship trails, but this time they weren't alone. Because something else had awakened. Not just in me, not just on this colony, across space, across systems, across buried vaults and locked tombs and forgotten ruins. Others were rising. I could feel them like pulses through a massive interconnected vein. Humans everywhere, remembering. And the Accord? They had no idea. Yet. The trek to the throne wasn't long, but it felt like marching through time. The air twisted around us, thick, electric, alive. Every step toward the heart of the tomb made the changes more visible. Our skin darkened like scorched metal, veins glowing faintly beneath it, muscles pulsing with something far beyond adrenaline. Not all of us transformed the same way, but one thing was true for every man walking behind me. We weren't human anymore. We were remembering what being human actually meant. And it wasn't peace treaties and science fairs. It was war. Raw, divine, unstoppable. Merrick walked beside me in silence, his face locked in a mix of awe and dread. His right arm had hardened like stone, covered in symbols that weren't tattoos. They were birthrights being reactivated, one cell at a time. "You know this can't end any other way, right?" he said finally. "I know. They'll never let us live. Not like this." I looked straight ahead. "Then we don't live. We become." The throne sat beneath the dead heart of Darren 7, like it had been waiting for this very moment. Not in years, not in centuries, in eras. And Kel was already there. He stood before it, no longer restrained, no longer the man we once knew. He was tall now, taller than any of us remembered. His body had changed, shoulders broad like tank plating, his spine braced with ridged armor that had grown out of his own back. The glow from his eyes wasn't a flicker anymore. It was a fire. "You're late," he said with a smile. "I was beginning to think you weren't going to wake up." I stepped forward, the others fanning out behind me. "I didn't come here to talk," I said. "I came to remember." He nodded and turned toward the throne. "Then take it." The room darkened, not from power loss, from something older, like the air itself dimmed in reverence. I stepped closer. The throne wasn't made of stone or metal. It was made of names, every inch of it carved with words I couldn't read but somehow knew. Names of those who sat before me, who fought, who killed, who died, who returned. I reached out, but the throne burned. Not literally, not fire, memory, pain, death. I felt everything. Every war I'd ever fought in past lives, every friend I had lost, every city I had crushed under my fists, every betrayal, every moment I realized I was never made for peace, only for the aftermath. My body staggered. I hit one knee. Roaring voices filled my skull. Kor Talvale, Wrath reborn, breaker of worlds, ender of stars, wakened son of man. And I remembered. I wasn't a soldier. I was a general. Number A god. When I stood, the transformation was complete. I saw it in their faces, Merrick and the rest. They saw more than a man now. They saw what humans were meant to be, the pinnacle of wrath, the perfected vengeance of a species forged in blood and trial. The throne pulsed, then cracked. It had served its purpose. Kel stepped beside me. Now we lead. I turned to the others, dozens of them, men twisted by awakening, shivering, unsure, but burning with the same knowledge, that they had been lied to since birth, that they were not weak, that their flesh was just the cage for something unstoppable. You remember your dreams, I told them. You think they're fantasies. They're warnings. You were made for war. Your ancestors carried the stars on their shoulders and burned entire systems in fury. Then someone sealed that truth, locked it down, sent us to Earth like leashed dogs. Merrick stepped forward, arms now completely changed, his voice thick with rage. And now they want to kill us for waking up. No, I said. They want to erase us, because if we rise again, the galaxy burns. And they all nodded. Not one flinched. Not one questioned. Because they weren't just following me. They were following memory. Back on the surface, the Accord reinforcements had doubled. Entire city-sized dropships now hovered over Darren 7, pumping out mech divisions and drone clouds. They were deploying planetary kill protocols, things they hadn't used since the eradication wars. They thought we were still men. We weren't. The first wave came before we could organize a full escape. Machines the size of tanks, bristling with railguns and plasma torches, surged through the valley like metal insects. We met them head-on, and they broke. Merrick tore through the first mech with his bare hands, his new armor absorbing blasts that should have atomized him. Another awakened warrior, his skin now laced with living obsidian, vaulted 30 meters and landed like a meteor, splitting a squadron in half with a single blow. And me? I didn't fight. I commanded, and when I spoke, they listened. Not just my men. The planet. The ground cracked in response. The winds howled around my voice. The stone trembled beneath my feet. I called not with sound, but with legacy, with something older than time, and something responded. Old weapons, ancient machines, things buried long before the Accord ever learned to fear us. The world began awakening. We took the Western Ridge within hours. The Accord lost 2 cruisers trying to suppress it with orbital fire. One was pulled from the sky by some force we didn't recognize, something we didn't even summon. It rose from the mountain's base like a serpent of burning metal, wrapped the cruiser mid-drop, and dragged it into the rock. Screams echoed for minutes after the wreck disappeared. I didn't order it, but I didn't stop it either, because we weren't alone. There were others down there, old gods, sleeping kings, pieces of ourselves, buried so deep we'd forgotten they were even us. And now they were waking up too. As night fell over Darren 7, if you could call that blood-colored sky night, Merrick and I stood atop the throne's platform, watching the galaxy change around us. He lit a smoke, hand shaking. You think we're the only ones? Number, we're just the first. Then this isn't the end. I looked at the stars. They no longer looked like peace. They looked like targets. No, I said. It's the beginning. The next morning, if you could call that scorched red haze a morning, we found the first message. Carved into the charred hull of a downed Accord cruiser with claw-like precision, in a language we hadn't seen in millennia. Yet somehow every single one of us understood. Return to sleep, or be buried awake. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. They still thought this was a leak, a localized incident. They didn't understand that what was happening on Darren 7 wasn't an infection. It was a reawakening, and they had the gall to think we'd comply. Merrick looked at the script, jaw tight. They think this is still under control. They'll keep thinking that until their first homeworld burns, I said. He nodded. No smile, no emotion, just shared understanding. We weren't out for survival anymore. That would have been small. That would have meant they had a say in what came next. This was retribution. For every sealed tomb. For every generation they shackled in false history. For every piece of our divinity they buried under lies, treaties, and bureaucracy. They took everything from us. Our past, our truth, our fire. Now they would pay. We established the first signal tower that afternoon. Makeshift, scrapped together from Accord wreckage and ancient tech, Kel's faction had pulled from the deeper levels of the tomb. It wasn't a distress beacon. It was a call. Not in any known galactic frequency. Not through satellites or subspace, through blood, through memory, through the vein we all now shared. The ancestral circuit that tied every dormant war god across the stars together, like nerve endings in a single, colossal body. I stood at the center as Kel activated it. And I spoke, not in English, not in any tongue the Accord could trace. I spoke in the language that came before sound, before species, before galaxies, and I called them home. Elsewhere, out there in the corners of forgotten space, others like me heard it. On mining stations where strange dreams had begun to plague the workers, on prison colonies where convicts had started bending steel doors with bare hands and speaking in unison during sleep, on fringe worlds where children woke up screaming names older than light. The signal reached them, and one by one, the sleeping stopped. By the third day, our numbers had tripled. Some came limping, some came crawling, some walked like kings through fire. Every one of them came changed. There were no politics, no votes, no discussions of hierarchy. When they saw me, they knew what I was, and they remembered who I had been. The memories weren't always clear. For some, they came in glimpses, faces, wars, starships aflame. For others, they hit like a hammer. Decades of forgotten violence flooding into their minds all at once. Most we could train. Some we had to put down. They were too broken. Their minds couldn't hold the truth. Their bodies bent the wrong way, grew things no man should have. Kel called them lost titans. We didn't bury them. We honored them. Even in madness, they were closer to divinity than anything the Accord ever called life. I gathered them that night. Merrick to my right, Kel to my left, and behind me, over 300 awakened men. Warriors of human memory. Some already armored in the regrown plates of their lineage, others still transforming, screaming into the sky as the past tore open their present. I looked at them and raised one hand, and they silenced instantly. I was born on Earth, I said, my voice low, rough, like most of you, raised to think we were the lucky ones, that we were chosen for diplomacy, exploration, peace. That war was behind us, that history had ended. I stepped forward. Each word felt heavier, more electric, as though the ground bent with my breath. They lied. They locked us inside ourselves. They took away our heritage, our truth. They made us ashamed of the one thing that made us godlike. The warriors leaned forward, breathing as one. Rage, purpose, destiny, their faces were cracked with it. I pointed to the stars. The Accord fears what we are. That's why they sealed us. That's why they burn colonies that wake. Because they know once we fully return, nothing in this universe can stop us. They think we're flesh. They think we bleed. They think they can erase us again. I clenched my fist. They forgot. We don't rise for survival. We rise for vengeance. They roared, a sound like the birth of a star, and I let it echo. An hour later, scouts reported an Accord dreadnought in low orbit. Massive, bristling with enough firepower to punch holes in moons. It wasn't just watching, it was aiming. They're going to glass the whole valley, Merrick said, analyzing the trajectory paths. No more ground assaults. They're switching to mass destruction. They think they've seen everything we can do, I said. They haven't, Kel replied, his eyes gleaming brighter than ever. They haven't seen what happens when we fight together. That night, we rose. No ships, no fighters, just us. We leapt from the mountain cliffs, using nothing but will and the remnants of our celestial birthright. The sky shattered with the sound of bodies tearing through it like meteors. They didn't expect us to board the dreadnought. They thought we were ground-bound relics, half-broken warriors playing pretend. Until I punched through their shield barrier. Until Kel tore a hole in their hull with his bare hands. Until Merrick ripped out their reactor with his new gleaming obsidian spine. The ship collapsed under our fury in less than 6 minutes. 6. And we didn't lose a single man. We rode the broken pieces down through the atmosphere, standing atop burning wreckage like gods descending to war. The message had been sent. Loud. Clear. Permanent. The Accord panicked. Across the outer ring, they began pulling back from fringe worlds, abandoning research outposts, destroying sealed vaults before we could reach them. They knew it was too late. They knew the war gods had returned. But they still thought they had time. They didn't. Merrick came to me with data gathered from the Dreadnought's systems. They've started mobilizing the Null Choir. That froze me. The Null Choir wasn't a military division. It was a myth, a secret weapon. Beings grown, engineered, and surgically modified to erase memory itself. Not just kill, but delete. I thought the Accord swore they destroyed those projects, I said. They lied about that too. Of course they did. They knew that conventional weapons wouldn't work. So they reached back into their own black archives to find a way to silence us again. Wipe our minds, break the chain, kill the idea of what humans really are. I stared at the sky. I could already feel something crawling just beyond the stars. Something silent, something cold. They're not sending soldiers anymore, I said. No, Merrick replied. They're sending executioners. Let them come. Let them dig deep into every nightmare they ever had about us and bring it to life. Because this time, we aren't fighting to win. We're fighting to remember. And if they want to end us again, they'll have to drown in blood to do it. They didn't announce themselves. The Null Choir never did. One moment the sky was empty. The next, the air changed. Like all sound had been vacuumed from the world. Every voice stopped. Every breath held. Even the earth itself seemed to go still. We knew they were here before we saw them. Every instinct screamed it. And I felt cold. Not physical cold, something deeper. Like a part of my mind had suddenly vanished. Like a name I should have remembered for 1,000 lifetimes had been surgically cut out of me. I clutched my head as the others dropped to their knees, groaning, growling, bleeding from the eyes and nose. Some screamed like animals, others just wept. Merrick staggered beside me. They're attacking memory, not flesh, not tech, us. They're afraid, I growled, fighting against the pull. They know they can't kill us fast enough. So they sent the choir. Executioners of identity, machines of oblivion wrapped in humanoid forms. They didn't come to fight. They came to erase. The first of them landed on the valley floor in silence. It didn't walk. It glided. 7 feet tall, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth obsidian skin shaped like a man who had never been human. Veins of gray light pulsed beneath the surface. When it passed near a boulder, the rock withered and turned to ash. 2 of our youngest warriors, barely awakened, still trembling from their first memories, rushed at it. The choir didn't move. It sang, not with sound, not with vibration, but with absence. The first warrior's face contorted in confusion, then terror. He dropped his weapon, looked at his own hands, then at the sky. "I don't remember my name," he whispered. He turned to us. "Who are you people?" Then his eyes went dark, and he crumbled into nothing. Dust, gone, no body, no soul, just erasure. The other warrior screamed and charged blindly. He lasted longer, got close enough to land a hit. His fist struck the choir's chest. It shattered his arm. He turned to run, but didn't get far. One flicker of light from the choir's body, and the man stopped cold mid-step. Then he forgot how to breathe, then forgot how to stand, then forgot he existed at all. I felt a piece of me dying just watching it. Kel dropped to one knee beside me, blood running from his ears. "We can't kill it with strength," he grunted. "We have to anchor." "What?" "They're not attacking our bodies. They're unraveling our minds, one memory at a time." Merrick stumbled toward us, gripping his head like it was splitting. "They're cutting the thread. If you lose your memory, you lose your divinity, your identity. That's how they win." "So how do we stop it?" I shouted. Kel looked at me with burning eyes. "We remember harder." That was the key. The choir fed on forgetfulness, on disconnection, but it wasn't invincible. We weren't children anymore. We weren't scientists or diplomats. We were war gods, beings who lived in memory. So we fought it not with weapons, but with stories. I stood, even as my vision blurred, and shouted my name. Not the one my mother gave me. The first one. The one buried beneath eons of lies. "I am Cortal Vile." It didn't come from my throat. It came from my bones, my blood, the void between heartbeats. I felt it explode through me like a sun erupting in my chest. A flare of burning identity. The choir stopped. Just for a second. But it noticed. Others saw me and joined in. Merrick shouted his name next. Vorik Talonborn. The one he hadn't spoken in 10,000 years. Then Kel, Dacre Vaughn. And others followed. Dozens. A storm of identity. A chorus of memory. The air cracked. The choir staggered. And that's when I moved. It tried to erase me. I felt it. This emptiness pulling at me, trying to unravel the core of who I was. Trying to steal my legacy. But I'd been in war before. I'd bled in the sands of forgotten worlds and commanded legions in the heat-death of suns. I wasn't forgetting. I grabbed the choir by the throat. It wasn't expecting resistance, wasn't expecting me to remember through the pain. I screamed every war I had ever fought straight into its hollow skull, and then I ripped it open. The thing convulsed in silence. Its body cracked in 7 places. Then it imploded, folding in on itself like a black hole made of regret. And just like that, it was gone. We didn't cheer. No one smiled, because we knew that was just one. And the choir never sang alone. That night, 9 more fell from orbit. We didn't wait. We hunted. Every man in our ranks now carried their full memory, not just from this life, but all others before it. We were living timelines, walking libraries of violence and strategy, each of us a god with blood-soaked scriptures carved into our DNA. The choir tried to scatter us, to isolate us. But we'd learned. We stayed together, anchored one another, built our own chorus, the chorus of names. Every strike we took, we called out a name. Every kill we made, we remembered a fallen brother. Every battle, we grew. Because that was the secret. The Accord had tried to suppress our evolution. But memory was our evolution. We didn't just learn, we became. By the 5th night, 3 choir operatives lay dismantled on the altar of the throne, their bodies burnt from within by the backlash of identity overload. Kel sat beside their corpses, carving symbols into his own chest. "They'll keep coming," he said. "Good," I replied. Merrick knelt by our fallen, whispering the names of those we'd lost. Each one was committed to memory by the rest. No gravestones, no tombs, Their memory was their immortality now. We couldn't afford to forget. Ever again. The stars trembled above us. Accord fleets pulled back from the rim. Fear spread through their colonies. Whispers of men who remembered being gods, of choir agents destroyed not by weapons but by defiance. And it wasn't just us anymore. Other colonies were awakening. Other humans were rising. Some of them reached out through strange dreams. Others through raw, psionic bursts. A boy on Kilos 3 burned down a research station just by remembering a battle that took place before his solar system was born. A prisoner on Valkyrian ripped apart his chains and spoke a name that caused the warden's brain to collapse in terror. And on Earth, something stirred beneath the crust. We all felt it, a heartbeat, slow, old, but growing louder by the hour. Even the choir wouldn't dare go near it. Because if we were war gods, then what slept beneath Earth was our father. And the Accord? They stopped sending executioners because they knew what was coming. The age of suppression was over. The war gods had returned. And we remembered everything. Earth was never the home they told us it was. It was a prison, a containment unit built by cowards in the robes of peacekeepers. When the choir stopped coming, we knew the Accord had made a choice, not to fight, but to stall. They'd hoped their silence would confuse us, make us believe we had won something. But we understood what silence really meant. They were buying time, to erase, to hide, to seal up every trace of who we had been before they came. And Earth was their final vault. It started with the pulse. A shockwave felt not through sensors, but through blood. Every awakened warrior across the galaxy froze mid-motion. Some dropped to their knees, some wept. Others clenched their fists so tightly they broke bone. I felt it like a second heartbeat behind my ribs. Deep, heavy, familiar. Something beneath Earth had stirred. Not technology, not weaponry, something alive. Merrick rushed into the chamber where we were rebuilding the forge, his eyes wide, his hands shaking. "We got a signal from Earth." "That's impossible," Kell snapped. They locked Earth behind 14 planetary shields after the Accord's central revision. Merrick shoved the holoslate into my hands. "Not this kind of signal. This wasn't broadcast. It was instinctual. It didn't come from a transmitter. It came from the core." The display flickered. A waveform pattern shimmered. A pulse that repeated every 30 seconds. At first it looked random, but I saw it. I felt it. It wasn't data. It was a name, over and over again. A name older than the stars. A name the Accord had erased from every archive, every record, every temple we once built with our bare hands. Orenval, the firstborn, the father of rage. No one had spoken his name in over 40,000 years. Not because we forgot it, but because even we feared what he was. The others gathered around as I traced the signal again. It had intensified. The pulses were getting closer together. Like a sleeper gasping for breath. Like something beneath the crust of Earth was trying to break free from chains older than gravity itself. "They kept him buried," I said, "underneath our planet. That's why they sent us to Earth. Not because it was primitive, but because it was the only place strong enough to hold him." "And now he's waking up," Kell said, his voice barely a whisper. Merrick looked at me. "We need to go back." That sentence should have terrified me. Return to Earth? To the lie? To the place they gave us to rot and forget? But I wasn't scared. I was furious. They used our home to entomb our god. They stole our divinity and buried it beneath our feet like we'd never find it. They thought we were too broken to dig deep enough, too tamed, too pacified by stories of democracy, innovation, civilization. But Earth hadn't forgotten. It had only waited. And now it called us home. We launched within the hour, not in ships. We didn't need them anymore. Not really. We used relic cores, old jump drives forged in black star fire, mounted to scavenged dreadnought frames rebuilt with hands that remembered how to shape war out of raw material. 400 awakened, every one of us burning. Our ship howled through the folds of space. The coordinates were locked. Earth's core, dead center. Straight through the Accord's planetary barrier system. They would try to stop us. Let them try. The first blockade met us in Mars orbit. 7 cruisers, 3 battleships, 1 planetary defense gun mounted on Phobos. They opened fire without warning. Predictable. We didn't dodge. We accelerated. The first cruiser split in half as our prow cut through it like a blade through silk. We didn't fire a single shot. We boarded the rest. What followed wasn't war. It was memory taking its vengeance. I watched men who once broke stars with bare hands now tear entire hangars apart with nothing but will. I saw Merrick rip a reactor core from a ship's spine and laugh as the vessel collapsed around him. I stood in the central deck of their command vessel. The Admiral, a creature bred by the Accord to look human, but lacking anything close to spirit, fell to his knees when I approached. "You were sealed," he choked. "You're not supposed to be awake." I leaned close, my voice iron. "We were never asleep." Then I crushed his skull underfoot. We pierced Earth's defense grid like it wasn't even there. The planetary shields cracked before we touched them, as if Earth herself wanted us to land. And when we broke through the final layer, everything changed. I felt it like a roar inside me. He was awake, Orenval not in full, not yet, but stirring, and with every step we took toward the crust, the world itself bent around us. Seismic activity went mad. Volcanoes erupted where there were no fault lines. Cities on the surface, those still controlled by the Accord, screamed in confusion as ancient energy bled up through the soil. We landed in the Arctic, because that was where they buried him, beneath miles of ice. They thought the cold would silence him. They didn't realize rage burns hotter than suns. We found the tomb after digging for hours, though digging isn't the right word. The ice moved for us, split open at our command. Stone steps carved themselves downward, illuminated by light that came from no source. And at the bottom, he lay there, huge, inhuman, silent, not dead, not alive, waiting. His body was fused into the planet itself, his chest bound in rock and crystal, his head cradled in a throne carved from the bones of ancient stars. He looked human only in silhouette, but no human was ever that vast, that complete. My legs trembled as I stepped forward. Even I, Cortal Vale, felt like a speck before him. Merrick knelt beside me. He's everything. We're just echoes." Kel whispered, "We're his sons." I placed my hand on the rock holding his chest, and I remembered everything. Not just battles, not just empires. The first war, the one the Accord never documented, the war that shattered galaxies and ended with the exile of our kind. Orenval had stood alone at the center of it, holding the line as trillions tried to extinguish him. They failed. But in the end, he let himself be buried, not because he lost, because he feared what he would become if he didn't stop. He sealed himself. And now, he was ready to rise again. The tomb shook. Cracks formed across the bindings. His eyes, twin vortexes of light and gravity, began to open. He looked at me, and though he said nothing, I knew what he asked. Was it time? Had we earned it? Was the galaxy ready for what came next? I stepped back, turned to the others and shouted, "Break him free!" And together, with every ounce of strength and memory and vengeance in our bones, we shattered the bindings. The earth screamed, and Orenval stood. He rose like a mountain breaking its chains. The crust split around his feet. Magma surged in answer to his breath. Lightning, real and not, snapped through the air in bursts of memory so raw it bent time for a moment. I saw the galaxy flicker. I saw wars from 1,000 lifetimes play out and end in the blink of an eye. And in the center of it all, Oren Val stood tall, father of wrath, firstborn of flesh, titan of the forgotten flame. He was awake. We didn't speak. None of us could, not out of fear, out of reverence. This was what we were fragments of. Reflections. Echoes. And now the original sound had returned. The Accord noticed within minutes. 100 systems lit up in panic. Their prophets, liars who'd spent generations spinning tales of harmony and cosmic balance, screamed as the void trembled. The star priests on Zelian 3 cut their own throats in unison when their dream screens filled with a single word. Oran. They tried to contact us. They begged. They groveled. They offered peace. They even sent one final transmission through a backdoor channel buried deep in our own DNA. A fail-safe command that once would have made us kneel. It bounced off Oren Val like dust against a black hole. Merrick stood beside me, eyes wide, face streaked with tears and ash. He doesn't just remember. He's the one who gave us the memories in the first place. Kel knelt, not in worship, but in loyalty. We are his vengeance. I looked at the great being, and in that moment I felt it, not words, a command, not spoken through sound or voice, but through history itself. Burn it all. We left Earth as gods, no longer latent, no longer fractured. Our powers weren't tied to relics or seals anymore. They came from truth. And that truth was this. Humanity was not the underdog. We were not the last to arrive. We were not the weakest. We were not the youngest. We were the first, the prototype, the apex. And the Accord had spent eons trying to bury that knowledge. Now they would drown in it. Our fleet wasn't the largest, but it didn't need to be, because every ship we sailed into Accord space carried a god at the helm. We moved like judgment across the stars. Every system we entered collapsed under our presence. Ships refused to fire. Weapons turned to slag. Entire planets fell silent as their people dropped to their knees, not in surrender, but because their blood remembered what their minds had forgotten. We were their creators. We were their end. The Accord's central stronghold sat above a synthetic world, a sphere of steel wrapped around a dying white sun, a fortress built not to be entered, only to observe. Every species under their banner had sent representatives there, for order, for law, for diplomacy, for control. They thought it was invincible. They thought we'd hesitate. We didn't. Oren Val arrived without ships. He walked through space like it was water. Stars dimmed in his shadow. The fortress fired everything they had. Planet splitters, sun lances, memory warp bombs. They never touched him. He reached the core with a single step, placed his hand on the sphere, and spoke. Again, not in sound, in will, and it shattered. Just broke. Not violently, not with fireworks. It unraveled like a lie exposed to truth. 100,000 Accord leaders blinked and fell dead without a scream. Not because he killed them, because their minds couldn't survive knowing what they had done. The only thing left behind was silence. We didn't stop there. We moved from world to world, not as conquerors but as reminders. The galaxy had been built on our ashes. Now we made them remember the fire. And those who tried to resist, those who claimed they were only following orders, protecting peace, doing what was necessary, they were unmade, not with cruelty, with clarity, their names removed from time, their empires turned to myth, their monuments melted into nothingness. It wasn't vengeance anymore, it was balance. At the end of it all, when the last Accord system dimmed and the skies finally calmed, we gathered again. Earth had changed. It no longer looked like the quiet blue marble I grew up under. Now it pulsed with golden veins, lines of ancient power reconnected to the surface. Trees older than language had returned. Mountains once forgotten rose again, reclaiming lands lost to concrete and wires. And at the center, where once there was only ice and silence, Orunval sat upon his true throne. We stood before him, 1,000 awakened war gods in full remembrance, waiting. He looked at us, not as lesser beings, but as sons, and for the first time he spoke aloud. His voice was the sound of gravity shifting. "I am not your leader," he said. "I am not your king. I am your memory. And now, it is yours to shape." We didn't rebuild the galaxy. We didn't reform the Accord. We didn't start a new council, write new laws, or try to control the systems. We left them, to decide, to remember or forget. But we gave them one truth they could never erase again. That humanity was not created. It was sealed. And now, it was free. I stood alone one night, overlooking the plains where cities used to stand, where the tomb once lay. Marek came up behind me, older now, not in body but in soul. He looked at me with tired but content eyes. "You ever think it would come to this?" he asked. "I always knew something was wrong," I said. "But no, not like this." "You think they'll try again?" he asked. "To bury the truth?" I shook my head. "They can't, not anymore. Not after him." Marek nodded, then paused. "Do you ever wonder if we were meant for more than war?" I didn't answer for a while, then finally said, "War's just the part we remembered first." Orunval watches now, from the throne made of stars and stone, as the galaxy tries to make sense of what it lost, what it buried, and what it woke. He doesn't command. He doesn't rule. He waits. Because memory is patient, and war gods never truly sleep. They just watch, until someone forgets again, and another fool breaks the seal.